Welcome to the Menopause Conversations podcast. My name's Angela Council and I'm your host for this podcast, and this is where you learn all about menopause, what is happening to your body, to your hormones, and life in general. Everything is changing and sometimes it can seem really confusing, but this is where the confusion stops right now. This podcast will share with you everything you need to know about how you can navigate your menopause transition with ease. So sit back and enjoy the show. Bye for now. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of Menopause Conversations podcast. My name is Angela Council, your host for today. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you will know that I'm always talking about menopause, what happens as you're with your body, as it changes, as you come through this transition, this natural transition. But what happens if your journey into menopause is not a natural one? And this is so common for so many different women. What if you are in either a medically induced menopause or a chemically induced menopause due to cancer? What happens? Now, I don't have first-hand experience about this. So what I did was I went to a friend of mine who does. Sonya Lovell is a personal trainer. She's a menopause advocate and she's the host of the Dear Menopause podcast. She's also a breast cancer survivor and she experienced the chaos, as she calls it, of being in a medically induced menopause due to the treatments that she had to undergo. And this happened when she was 47. Because Sonya already had a pretty good knowledge about being healthy and being well, she didn't really expect all of the turmoil to happen. And this is what I wanted to talk to Sonya about. I wanted to learn about her experience, what she did, what happened, and importantly, because she had breast cancer, she was not able to take what many people would take, which would be a menopause hormone therapy option, or HRT, depending on what terminology you use. That wasn't an option for her. So she had to look at what could she do, could she do that was in line with the medication she was on, what happened when her doctor changed her medication. So we talk about a lot of this in the podcast. So I learned a lot. It was a very deep conversation. I was very privileged that Sonya shared her journey with me, shared what was going on, her feelings. We got quite personal in this from her point of view as someone who was experiencing the cancer. And also I shared a little bit of my story as being a carer for someone who has cancer. So I hope you know, whether or not this is something you've experienced or someone around you. I mean, the number of women who are being diagnosed with breast cancer, ovarian cancer, these type of cancers is growing, unfortunately, at a remarkable rate. So it's probably a good possibility that maybe someone you know has gone through this situation. So have a listen, and maybe you might get a bit of a bit of an insight into how women experience menopause when they're going through cancer. So have a listen, enjoy, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast to have a bit more of a chat. So that we record.
Oh yeah, that's my biggest fear, is that I'm going to forget to hit record when I do my podcasts.
I've got this big, and I actually have a sticky note.
Right. That's a very good idea. That's what I need to do.
Even then, sometimes I forget to push the record button, even though it's right in front of me.
Even though it's right there in front of you. I've been really lucky, actually. I've had some guests that have gone, oh, don't forget to record. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry.
I know. Okay, you right?
I'm good.
Okay, so I'll just jump in and we'll just go from there. Okay,
yep, sweet.
So I am absolutely delighted to have Sonya with us this week, and we're going to be talking about when menopause isn't that natural transition, when things don't go the way that, we expected that they were going to. So thank you so much, Sonya, for coming and sharing your story. So you had a cancer diagnosis, which put you into an earlier menopause. Can you kind of give us, well, firstly, what the diagnosis, what that meant with your life, and what that meant for you with that transition into menopause? And that's probably a really big question, but let's just start.
It's okay.
Start big.
We'll start at the beginning and we'll chip away at it. Angela, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really pleased that you we're shining the light on, as you say, menopause when it's not as nature intended, and it's actually a really surprisingly large percentage of the population that do experience menopause that isn't a natural transition. I had a breast cancer diagnosis when I was 47. No genetic history, no family history, just one of those things. And I was lucky enough, in many respects, to find the lump in my breast myself, doing checks in the shower. But once you get that diagnosis, it is a very quick roller coaster ride into specialist appointments, surgeries, and everything else. And I remember in my first appointment with my oncologist, he said to me, okay, so just so you know, the closer that you are in age to your natural menopause, the more likely it is that you will go into a medically induced menopause as a result of the chemotherapy. So it's actually the chemotherapy that sends you into the medically induced menopause for me. For some women, it's surgery, but for me, it was the chemotherapy. And my vague memory of that conversation is going, oh, okay, cool. Yay, one less thing I'll need to worry about when I'm in my 50s. Okay, cool. Little did I know, and little did he prepare me for what that actually meant. So I didn't even know about perimenopause at that point in time. I was sailing through my 40s. My period had never changed. I'd had no symptoms whatsoever that I was even close to that actual natural menopause. And so I had my last period, I think it was like the week after I got home from surgery. And then I went off and had chemo and never had a period again. And in the turmoil of everything that's going on in that time, like you're dealing with obviously the trauma of a cancer diagnosis, which is significant, although it's put to the side and it's something you end up dealing with well after treatment and everything is finished. There's the trauma. There's the, for me, there was a lot of mother guilt. And, I've talked about this in the past where when I got the diagnosis from my GP, my initial thoughts weren't about, oh my God, what does that mean for me? It was like, oh my God, what does this mean for my kids? Oh my God, what about my family? Like my eldest had just, he was in year 12. And, it was a really big time. And I went straight into that place that we go to as mothers, where it was all about, what does this mean for everybody else except for me? And so I was wading my way through that. And then you are literally on this runaway train of doctor's appointments and treatments. So the whole fact that I had gone into this medically induced menopause was never mentioned again from my specialists until, well down the track when I kind of was like, well, this is going on. Why? And I was just dealing with chemo. You kind of take one day at a time. It's like, okay, so today is a chemo day, right? So, or it's the week leading up to chemo and you do the chemo stuff. And it wasn't until I was actually going through radiotherapy, so I had a 7-month window basically of active treatment. So I went surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. And it wasn't until I was partway through my radiotherapy that I really started saying to my specialist, like, there's all this stuff going on that's just weird, like brain fog. I mean, and, there is chemo fog. And as much as I say weird, a lot of it can be attributed to the treatments that you're going through. I was having the most horrendous hot flushes. I was losing words. Like I could not string a sentence together without forgetting at least one of the words in each sentence that I was trying to say. The hot flushes were horrendous. The night sweats were very brutal. And still, even when I brought all of that stuff up, there was no support around the fact that these were menopausal symptoms that I was experiencing. And my cancer was estrogen and progesterone positive. So that meant that it was hormonally driven, and therefore I was HRT or MHT was not an option for me. And also from a natural medicine perspective, I didn't want to delve into using. I mean, my oncologist was obviously very against using any of the natural medicines anyway. But then, I am a very strong-headed woman, so I did my own research. But even after doing all of that, I had so much fear around recurrence and having gone through these last 7 months of hell, wanting to then potentially have to go through it again because of something that I didn't treat something properly. Like there's all sorts of guilt and emotional stuff that you're wading through. So I basically got kind of shot out the other end of all my active treatments, went on to tamoxifen. They want to suppress your hormones, and even though I had stopped having my period, it wasn't 12 months. So as much as, there's that assumption that you're in menopause, you're still, until it's been that 12-month timestamp since you had your period, you're not deemed to be menopausal. Then we did blood panels, and it was like, okay, well, you're definitely postmenopausal now. They then swapped up my drugs. They took me off tamoxifen and put me onto another drug called letrozole, which works differently. The tamoxifen kind of is more, it blocks the receptors on the cells to not allow the estrogen to kind of take hold. Letrozole actually stopped me from producing any estrogen whatsoever, and that almost killed me. That was horrendous. It was when I ended up in my oncologist's office, sobbing hysterically, basically saying, I cannot do this anymore. I went from being, I'm a personal trainer. I've always been super active all my life. Even I trained right through my treatment, that was helpful, and it was good for my head as well as my body. But on the letrozole, I turned into a 90-year-old woman within, a short period of a couple of weeks. I could not get out of bed and weight bear on my feet because my joints were in so much pain. I couldn't walk down the stairs. Our house is 3 stories and our bedroom is on the top floor, and I had to go sideways. I had to sidestep down each step on the staircase. And I used to say to my husband, this is ridiculous. Like, if we have a fire, I'm not getting out of here. My body literally seized up. And now I know, having done my own research and all of the, how I now work with women myself, those are actually, for a lot of women, the same symptoms that they experience during perimenopause or postmenopause. And when you go through a medically induced or a surgically induced menopause, all of those things happen at once really quickly. Yeah. So it's much more traumatic. It's the symptoms are also, I suppose, exacerbated, if for want of a better word. Like they're much more intense. So that was hard, like having to manage coming out of active treatment, having these horrendous menopausal symptoms as a result of the medication that I was on, which I was on to save my life, is really hard.
So how did you manage that? Did you stay on the medication, or what did you do to manage that? I mean, because as you say, we still have to have a life, and you don't want to feel like that for the rest of your life. That's kind of like, this is what the next 50 odd years is going to be like. Mm-hmm. That's not a great, it's not a great prospect.
No, the quality of life was horrendous when I was on the letrozole. So what happened was I ended up in my oncologist's office. I burst into tears, which, is really quite unlike me. And I just went, I can't do this anymore. I cannot take this medication anymore. And he gave me there's actually a term for it. And I think it's called like a a pause from treatment, or there's a more technical term for that, but I was allowed 6 weeks of break from any medication. So, and I said to him, I said, if you don't let me go off this, I'm going to stop taking it anyway. So I would rather work with you to do this properly, or I'm just going to stop it. And he was like, he was a gorgeous man and he was lovely, but he was also very like, Sonya, I'm saving your life. Like, don't mess with me here. I'm the boss. I'm saving your life. And so I was like, let's work this out. And he was like, okay, you can have 6 weeks off it, but you have to come back to me at week 5 and you have to tell me you are either going back onto the letrozole or you're going back onto the tamoxifen. And I was like, okay, cool. So I took the 6 weeks and I allowed my body to heal as much as I could in that 6 weeks. I, went to town on my nutrition and my exercise and my meditation, and really, really allowed my body to just heal for the first time that it really had since before my diagnosis. And then I made a decision. I went back to him and I was like, well, okay, so I have to take something. That's where we're at. I'll go back on the tamoxifen. It was literally like, there's 2 devils here. Which one do you want to play with? And I was like, well, I don't like that devil. That devil is like way, way too nasty for me. I'm not playing with him again. Is that called the devil or him? And so I chose the tamoxifen, and it was like, okay, cool. I'm great. Yes, good. But you need to be on that for another, I think at that point I had another 3.5 years to go. So my oncologist doesn't know this, so I hope he's not listening, but I did take myself off.
I doubt it.
I doubt it too. I did take myself off my tamoxifen 6 months shy of my 5-year anniversary, and he wanted me to be on it for potentially longer than 5 years. But I went, you know what? I'm done now. I want my quality of life back. So I've been off that now. I've been off it for about 4 or 5 months. But I went back onto tamoxifen and I went, okay, well, this is what I need to do. I need to keep myself alive for myself and for my family. I need to do everything that I can to prevent my risk of recurrence. Taking tamoxifen is a part of that for the next few years. I've stopped. I don't drink alcohol anymore, so I've stopped drinking because that plays a big part in, preventing that recurrence for me as well. I got really clear on what I wanted my nutrition to look like. I exercise 4 times a week. I still run a personal training business, so I'm really super active, and I'm doing everything that I can to just keep myself as healthy as possible. But I guess your question initially was about how did I manage the symptoms when I couldn't, obviously couldn't take anything like a HRT, MHT, or any other natural products to do that. And that's where I learned, I suppose, a lot about the nutrition, how you can actually, you can really support your body a lot through nutrition, particularly, looking at your protein ratio, looking at your macronutrients and, how much am I getting across a day, across a week, that sort of thing. We installed ceiling fans in the house as well as air conditioning so that I can sleep under a ceiling fan at night. I sleep with the silk pillowcase. All fabrics I tend to wear now are very natural. I've turned into the resort woman that just wears linen and cotton and bamboo. I stopped drinking. In the summer, it was funny. I was having a conversation with a lady that's in my community, and she was like, and she went into surgical menopause this year. So she in winter, and she hasn't experienced a summer yet, and she's having horrendous symptoms at the moment. She's like, oh my God, what am I going to do in summer? And I was like, things like having a cool shower before you go to bed. So just bringing your body temperature down a little bit, or if you've got lucky enough to have a swimming pool, go for a dip. Just something that reduces your kind of core temperature before you even get into bed and attempt to try and sleep. What else? They're probably the key things that have worked for me. Really, really, meditation, making sure that I take time to that my mental health is also in a good space. I've done a lot of counseling. I've done, I use cognitive behavioral therapy when I can't sleep at night, if I'm having sleep issues. I've got certain practices that I use to help me fall back asleep. They're probably the key things that I do.
So now, obviously, I have never been in your situation. I've been in the carer situation. So, So I've kind of been on the other side. But so I don't know if this question is going, how this question is going to sound, but do you think that a lot of times doctors use a big fear factor to get you to do what they want you to do? So your doctor basically said, you can take this drug or this drug. There were no other options. And given they're probably not trained in anything else, but do you think that it's like, I'm saving your life? Do you think that there's a lot of that kind of pressure that's put on people so that, you know, and women are, they're in this situation, they've had this diagnosis, they've gone through treatment, now all of a sudden they kind of, you know, their body's changing and it's pushing them through this medically induced menopause at a faster rate than they would naturally go. So do you think that sometimes doctors have a little bit of, I know, I'm just going to say dictatorial stare?
There was another phrase that was coming to my mind, but kind of along the same lines. Look, yes, to a degree, I do. I do think, and you know what, I was having this conversation with a girlfriend yesterday, and I almost see the health and wellness industry, if we talk about, you've got your highly westernized doctors and specialists on one end of the spectrum, and you've got your naturopaths, and more natural healers on the other end. Yeah. I feel it's a little bit like politics. Yes. That you get in both camps, you get people that go to the extreme, and they never the twain shall meet. And and I just my absolute dream for the world would be to find a space where both can work together, and understand where each other is coming from, and find a space where we can be a little bit more moderate in the way that we treat people, and and they kind of come up with treatment plans and what have you. So
that is happening. I know that's happening, because I know quite a few naturopaths that work with doctors. And when my husband was going through his treatment, and we spoke to the surgeon, and I said, so, what can we do? And she was completely open to trying nutrition and herbs and everything. She said, fine, you try it, that's fine. And I'll do and yes, it was surgical. He did do radiation, and he did end up doing some immunotherapy, but they were prepared to work with me. Well, I actually got another naturopath to do that. So I think that is happening. There is some coming
Agreed.
together.
And there's some beautiful integrative medicine practitioners out there that do have, a foot in both camps, if you like. Unfortunately, I feel like they're very hard to access, and they're very cost inefficient for a lot of people. And when we talk about, the percentage of the population, particularly here in Australia, that are regional and rural, that they're just not options that are available to them. So yes, I do agree that it is happening. It does exist. I just don't think it's as mainstream as I would like it to be.
It isn't. I know that when I was trying to find a naturopath to work with my husband, because I said that no, I wouldn't do that. I said, I'm either your wife or your practitioner. I can't be both.
Yeah, you can't do both. Yep.
And it took me a while to actually find a practitioner, because they were all booked out.
Well, exactly. And also, there is also, from their perspective, they have a lot of fear. Like, they're not allowed to market themselves as I work in the cancer space, because they are also restricted by all sorts of, regulations and what have you around what they can say they can and can't do. I found that out. I too went, to try and find some naturopathic help as well. And it's hard. It is hard. And, you think if it's hard for someone like you and I, then it's almost impossible for the average person that doesn't have the inside knowledge and the understanding that we have. But coming back to your original question around, do I feel like there is fear used? I'm going to say yes, but as somebody that has been faced with that diagnosis, and somebody who has had to make decisions that could potentially be life-saving, it's not as simple as saying that they just use fear, because when you have been faced with your own mortality, and I had people say to me, oh, you're lucky you got the good type of cancer. And, and I've lost friends to cancer that, I hate using the word lucky. Like, if I hadn't found my lump because I checked in the shower, give it another couple of months and my outcome could have been completely different. Yes, So yes, I do think that they do sort of, I was going to use like a phrase to describe them as like that kind of God,
Yeah,
complex, it's my way or the highway type of thing. But we are talking about someone's life. And when you're, for me, my experience, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I love life. Did not want to be faced with the possibility of not being alive in a couple of years' time, to see my kids get married and to go on and have grandchildren. And when you're sitting in that space, and you've also got to remember, those decisions were all made before I did any counseling, before I had done any healing physically, emotionally, spiritually. I was a mess. I was one hot mess. And you are sitting in this space being asked to make these decisions about your life, and your head is just a mess. And so you don't have the luxury, I guess, of going, yeah, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to sit on that and let me go away and spend a couple of weeks meditating on this and deciding if it is the right thing for me. You are almost forced into making reactive decisions. And, and I did use the word forced there, which does go back to what we were talking about, that dictatorship kind of role that they may have. But as someone that's been in that position, I'm grateful that they were able to save my life, and that
yeah,
I am here, and that I can have the confidence. I mean, I could still have a recurrence regardless of all the amazing things that I'm doing. There is that little seed of doubt in the back of my mind, and it will be there forever. And every time I worked in the cancer space for a little while for a not-for-profit in the breast and ovarian cancer space, and that was actually really confronting for me, because I was coming across a community that were having diagnoses of recurrences and people that were losing their lives as a result. And that every time I came across someone like that, hammered home that that could still be me sometime down the track. And that's hard to have that little seed. I mean, we could all step off the footpath and be hit by a bus tomorrow. There's absolutely no doubt. But when you've been through a diagnosis and you did all the hard work and you did all the active treatment, and you've still got that little seed of doubt left in the back of your mind that my number could still come up again.
yeah, it's actually, once again, from sitting on where we are in our family, we are now out to 6 monthly checks. But for the last 5 years, it's 3 monthly checks and 3 monthly scans, and we have had recurrences.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but it is just part of the way it is. And we go through it. We've had that. You've got 2 months to go sort your life out. But we got through that, and then and it is very, very tiring just to keep. It's not actually when he kind of gets told he's got a metastasis and there's more cancer and everything. It's the tests. It's just the waiting for the results.
The anxiety.
Yeah. And now that we're out to 6 monthly tests, that's, makes it a little bit easier, because we've got more space before we have to kind of think about, well, what are these tests going to come back? But, even last time when it had spread, he kind of knew before the test. He said he could feel it. He knew that. So it's like, yeah, and it is just sitting there all the time. It's just this constant, it just sits there behind the scenes and trying to plan something. It's like, we're planning to move and all of this, and it's like, for several years it's like, well, am I moving on my own or am I moving with him? Because there's all this stuff that just goes on all of the time. But this isn't about me. This is about
no, but you know what? You do bring up a really good point, because this was something that was, my husband came up against as the carer. And I firmly believe, as I have really strong views around the lack of support for, and I'm going to use my experience, women coming out of, cancer diagnoses and treatments, and then being left in this state of induced surgically or medically menopause. The support is incredibly poor. And it is, women are left to find their way through this, and it's horrendous. But the carers during the treatment and period of diagnosis, and, you've got your ongoing kind of thing going on with your husband, there is also a significant lack of support there for the carers as well. And I think also, empathy and understanding. And, as a cancer patient, we talk a lot about how just because our treatment has finished, it doesn't mean that our journey is over. And I hate using that word journey to talk about this, but sometimes it works. You know, and people that have either not been a carer or have not experienced a cancer diagnosis and a treatment, which is most of your friends and family, realistically, they think your treatment's over. And so it's like, okay, cool, Sonya's all good now. She's off, she's off and running. But actually you're not. It took me 3 to 3.5 years to even be back at a place where I went, oh, okay, I think I'm okay now. And in that 3.5 years, the support from friends and family slips away because they think that you're okay and you finished your treatment now and you got to live. So yay, you're moving on with your life. But the same thing's there for the carers. My husband really, really struggled when I got my diagnosis. And, you know, he is very much the provider and the supporter and the fixer of things. And so he was suddenly faced with this situation where he couldn't fix things. He couldn't make it better for me. He couldn't say, okay, what can I do right now? He just needed to be, you know, I can remember vividly one afternoon, and I'm sure you've had many moments like this as well, where it was post a chemo treatment. I was sitting on the side of the bed and I was just depleted and I just was sobbing, and there was nothing had triggered it specifically. There was no underlying thing that had happened to start my sobs, but I just was uncontrollably sobbing, and he could do nothing but sit beside me with his hand on my back. And it didn't matter if he'd said anything, you know, he could do nothing to make it better. And that for a carer is really hard.
It is. Because I mean, me as a practitioner, I wanted to fix. And that was the first thing I did was, what can I do? And then I finally had to take that step back and going, okay, no, I'm actually too emotionally involved with this. I can't make decisions. I can't recommend things, because if I recommended things and something went wrong, I would be holding all of that. So it's like, and he continued to come and ask me things, and I'm going, actually, no, I think we need to get someone else, and you see them and you do everything with them. I'm happy to get all the product and everything that's required.
Yeah.
But you do what they say, because I can't. It's very hard to do that because you're just too emotionally attached to everything, and it's like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? And but where I wanted to go, and you actually did touch on this, if we had an ideal world, and which we don't, obviously, because if we had an ideal world, we wouldn't have so many women getting cancer, but we're close to an ideal world. What would support look like? I mean, for you were close to your natural menopause anyway. But we have women in their 30s who are going through this treatment, and then all of a sudden they get pushed into an early menopause. So it's a really big shock for them.
Oh, it is.
They have no idea of what any of this is. You already had an understanding of hormones.
Oh no, look, I'd had my kids. I was, my childbearing days, my years of being fertile were well and truly over. I was at peace with that. And it's, and I'll come to your question in a second, but it just reminded me of a conversation that I had with Professor Jayashri Kulkarni on my own podcast. And Jayashri is one of Australia's leading clinical psychiatric researchers. And she does an incredible amount of work into menopausal depression. And we talked about specifically the young women in there. So we talked about the grief that is not supported and addressed for those women in their 20s or 30s that do end up in a medically or surgically induced menopause, because they lose that ability to be fertile. They lose their fertility. They lose, even if at that point in their life they hadn't even made a firm decision that they wanted to be a mother and they wanted to go ahead and have a family, to have that literally that choice just taken away from you from a mental health perspective is horrendous. And
it's also a youth thing, isn't it? Because we see menopause as something that happens to older women.
Old ladies. Yeah.
Well, it's not true, but
no, it's not.
But that
is the societal perception. Yeah, when you're 30, you know. So so coming back to what support do I feel would be helpful for all women? I think that Oh my God. The ideal world would have you not only working with an oncologist, a radiotherapy oncologist, a breast surgeon for me, you would also have a nutritionist, and you would have a counselor, and you would have an fitness or exercise movement, person in there as well. Those, the three things that I feel would make a huge difference to anyone that is, if we talk about menopause, that is experiencing a menopause of any, even natural menopause. These are the three pillars that I see from a lifestyle perspective. You get this opportunity to if you're going through a natural menopause, you get the opportunity in your 40s, if you're educated, which is what my huge platform is, to make these changes now so that you future-proof your body. But if you're put into it in an induced or surgical state, then, to have those people as a part of your team, as a part of your post-treatment team, that you are handed over to those people, the world of difference that would make would be huge.
Yeah, I think post-treatment, because that's something that our medical system doesn't really do that well, does it, when it comes to post-treatment? It's almost like, here's your treatment, you're done, come back and see me in a few months' time and we'll check it again. And there's not a lot of extra support.
No, my oncologist did say to me, look, if you feel you'd like to see a nutritionist, I've got someone I can refer to. If you feel that you'd like to see a counselor, then, I can always find someone in our team to refer you to. But it wasn't, again, it was, the onus was put back on me. It was like, if you feel like you'd need it, like I had no fucking idea, sorry. I had no idea at that point how I felt. And
you think that, like, I've had a hip operation, and when I had my hip operation, I was booked in for rehab for 6 weeks afterwards to recover from that operation and kept myself walking again. That's what they need. It's like, okay, you've had your treatments. Now what is your post, treatment protocol? And it's just a given that you're going to go through this, rather than, do you think you want to speak to someone? It ideally should already be attached. It's kind of, this is the next step of your treatment. You've done this part. Now this is the next step. We need to get you well and healthy again, instead of basically leaving you where you've finished your treatment and you're basically completely drained, your body's gone, and all, and you've got to find ways yourself, and you're educated, so you know how to do that, but the majority of women don't. And this is probably why we get more recurrence going on too, because they aren't, particularly if they can't afford to go and see a naturopath, a nutritionist, a personal trainer, and all of that. They're just going to go back to doing what they were doing before. And, that's, our body's just it's not healing properly.
No, that's exactly right. And yeah, so that's exactly what I would like to see in my ideal world. It would be that post-care team that, every human gets the opportunity to and there would be government subsidies to make it affordable and accessible, and you wouldn't have to live in a city. We have such a great telehealth system now because of COVID. If we want to talk about things that, silver linings that came out of COVID, which I don't think there were too many, but one of the things that was that telehealth became a thing, and not just a thing for the people in society that had no other option. It became an option for practitioners and the public to access and get a really good level of healthcare as a result. So why are we not tapping into that more? And I keep bugging Bronnie Taylor, who's the New South Wales I forget her exact role, but she's a politician in New South Wales, and she does a lot of work in women's healthcare, but she's rurally based. So I think she might actually be a GP with her background, but I'm constantly at her, like, when are we going to get these telehealth options available for menopausal women, rurally and regionally, because they don't have access. There is a globally acknowledged education gap in GPs when it comes to women's health over the age of 40. There's this invisible gap. Everyone's great at looking after women through their childbearing years and those post pregnancy stage. And then when you're a senior, and you are starting to have, more age related issues, but there's this gap for women's health, and there's not enough education and there's not enough support from our medical community. And we need to address that, and we need to be really supporting our women that don't have as easy access to doctors and things as we are blessed with by living in the city.
Yeah, totally and utterly agree with you. I mean, I think most doctors only get like a couple of hours education on menopause. And
yeah, and I
and
think it's optional. I think it's like an elective. So
yeah,
it's
right.
it is, I think, and look, I do believe that there are a lot of people now talking about it, and and the light is being shone on the fact that this education gap exists. I mean, the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually published their very first ever menopausal fact sheet about a week ago.
Yeah.
How ridiculous is that?
I know. Given that, like half the population goes through menopause, it's like this big secret no one talks about.
Nope. No, well,
And
unfortunately, that's been the problem in the past. But
yeah.
yeah.
And when we are talking about it, I believe that there's a little bit of a bias towards the conversation because it's being funded by some very large pharmaceutical companies. So the push is always about HRT, and and that's great. We're talking about it, but we need to be looking at what are all the different options, because yes, there are women who cannot take HRT or MHT, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
There are women who decide that they don't want to. There's also women that really don't need to. I've seen
100%. And that's where addressing the lifestyle issues, one big part of the work that I'm trying to do is to really educate women in their 40s when they're in their perimenopausal years to know that perimenopause is a thing and they're in those years, but the lifestyle changes and choices that we make in those years will impact significantly how you experience your post-menopausal years, but also your need for, an MHT, as we call it now. It shouldn't be called HRT anymore. I think the UK is the only country left that actually calls it HRT. It's actually completely ignorant and outdated terminology, but it's MHT, which is menopausal hormone
therapy.
That, you can reduce the likelihood that you will need that support. Yeah. And if you go and see, I've interviewed quite a few GPs for my my podcast, and look, I do have the GPs that are registered with the Australasian Menopause Society, so they have put their hand up and said, hey, this is an area I'm interested in. But they will all say that before they put a woman onto any type of hormone therapy, they will have a conversation around lifestyle. What, are you drinking? Are you smoking? Are you exercising? What's your diet like? And, that, so there is an knowledge amongst a selection of GPs that those things need to be addressed, but that is not every GP. And, unfortunately, there will be women that end up in a chair in a doctor's surgery being just handed a prescription.
Yep, or being told to go and get the uterus cut out. That's big at the moment as well.
Gosh, that's not good. No, that's a whole other can of worms.
That's right. So share with our audience where they can find out more about you, your podcast, which I listen to, which is great. So just share your links, your socials, your podcast, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my podcast is called Dear Menopause, and I have a Kiwi accent. So just to be clear, that's as if you're writing a letter to menopause. And my podcast is available on every streaming platform anywhere. So wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll find Dear Menopause. And that is an interview-based format. At weekly episodes on a Friday, I always have an interview with either a women's health specialist or just an average woman who's happy to share her experience. I'm on Instagram, which is stellarwoman_by_Sonya. And I have a community called We Are Stellar Women, which is on run through a Facebook group, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes, I think. So they're the best places to find me.
And you're not working just with women who've been through cancer. You work with women in their 40s to prepare them for what is possibly going to come.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, so I'm very much about that. Preparing women for menopause, regardless of and obviously you can't prepare for a surgical or induced menopause necessarily, but you can help. I can help with them post that. But for women that are going to go through a natural menopause, then the more preparation and future proofing you can do now, then that's the women that I love to work with and educate and inform and support, in the way that I never was.
Yeah, and I think that's a big one, and because because this is the issue I've found, is that most women don't realize that perimenopause exists, and that they can actually make a change if they actually start working from their, like in their early 40s, they start making some changes, the amount of difference that it makes. But this is why we need to be having these conversations, because women will start to hear that. Women will start to hear, because we can't stick our head in the sand forever and think, well, it's never going to happen, because it will, regardless of what you think, menopause will happen. The better prepared you are, the better that journey is. And we need to change the conversation. It's great to be having a conversation, but it doesn't need to be a conversation that it's just going to be the worst time of your life.
Oh, no. And that's the other thing that I really want to highlight for women as well, is it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, yes, some women really suffer, and they really, truly do. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to support them. But, one of the things that I love talking about, because obviously, I'm now well into my postmenopause, there is this incredible gift of freedom and confidence. And I actually, I think that, one of the things, if we get into a little bit of the physiology, our testosterone actually rises a little bit once we're postmenopausal. And I love that, because it actually makes us a little bit more ballsy. It makes us a little bit more, this is my time. I am now going to, and it truly is our midlife. There are many people that live now well into their hundreds. I'm not well into their hundreds, but they live to be over 100. If we're 50, I'm 52, I've still got a good half of my life left to live. And I truly believe that post-menopause, you step into this place where you can truly step into your power. You can really, take the world, by its horns and give it a good shake, and go out there and really enjoy life. And being postmenopausal does open that up for you.
Well, I think that's a really great place to finish. So I want to thank you for joining us today, for sharing your story, for kind of giving us, showing me the other side of what happens when, women do go through this medically and chemically induced menopause, because we do, as you say, there's so many women that are going through this stage of life where things are just changing really, really quickly. So I want to thank you for being open with sharing your story and the gems of wisdom that you have shared with us today. So thank you so much for your time, Sonya.
Oh, my pleasure, Ange, and thank you for having me.
And I wish you all the best in the future. And I'm sure I can catch up with you before I move out of the Northern Beaches here in Sydney and move to another state.
I know, absolutely. And look, we'll still be online friends anyway.
That's right. So thanks everyone for listening, and I'll be back next week with another episode of Menopause Conversations podcast. Bye for now. So that was a big conversation, wasn't it? Did you enjoy it? Did you learn something? Sonya, what she shared in her story, what happened with her, it was amazing. And she was really honest about her experience and, where things didn't go well for her and where things did. Now, if you want to learn more about the work that Sonya does, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, she's a personal trainer and she works with women to support them through this time of life, this transition. You can find out more about Sonya over on her website, which is Stellar Women, which is STELLAR women.com.au, so Stellar Women. Her podcast is called Dear Menopause. Great podcast. Love listening to it. She has some fantastic guests on. Instagram is Stellar Women _by_Sonya. And Sonya is spelled with SONYA. So Stellar Women _by_Sonya. And her Facebook community is We Are Stellar Women. You'll find over there. You can go and join her. So go and follow the work that Sonya is doing, listen to her podcast, hear some of the, as I said, remarkable guests she has on the podcast, and learn a little bit more about how Sonya works. Now, if you are interested in continuing this conversation, if you want to learn more, if you want to let me know how what you thought of the podcast, why not join me over in the Menopause Conversations Facebook group, where we can talk more about this, have a deeper conversation, and maybe you've got something to contribute as well. So please go to Facebook and join the Menopause Conversations Facebook group. And if you share your email address when you do that, I will send you an ebook with some recipes on balancing your hormones. So that's my thank you for sharing your email address with me. So that's it from me. I will be back next week with another sensational podcast, and I will see you then. Bye for now.